The right wing of the Republican Party has spent the last 49 years literally trying to get Roe versus Wade overturned. Now we have this draft opinion that does just that and could do it with the force of law within weeks. So why aren't Republicans talking about that? Saying that if the draft comes down as written, they win. That they delivered something they told voters they were going to do. It's all been out in the open. We've been hearing something very different, and I mentioned earlier in the program that for the last 2 days, we've been focused on the substance of this. If you saw any of our coverage, we were down at the court. We devoted a lot of time to that, and that was on purpose, because that's what's most important, and we try to give you the most important news first. The leak, procedurally, is less significant, although it is an unprecedented breach of Supreme Court rules, and now it is becoming the obsession of the people who said this would be a good thing, and that's interesting. So let's start here. A majority of Americans oppose what Alito's draft would do. A majority oppose overturning Roe. There's a Fox News poll that says, depending on how you ask it, about 65% of people support Roe v. Wade, a nearly 2-to-1 margin. And that's now. That's this year, at a time when our politics are so polarized over everything, from politicians to basic facts about the insurrection, and yet that is not a 50-50 number. That is an overwhelming position. It, by definition, includes self-identified conservatives, Republicans, and some Trump voters. So Republican politicians, well, they can read those same polls. And Senate Republicans are distributing their messaging on this. And it's not celebrating what they did. I mean, this is Republican appointees on the court, and everyone knows that. Instead, they say, expose the Democrats for extreme views on the other side. They're not discussing the historic seismic ruling. They're not discussing how many different states under Republican state laws only will immediately take whatever comes out of the court if it overturns Roe and ban abortion. Instead, it's been pretty striking politically. And again, this doesn't happen every year, every election cycle. This has been 49 years of Roe on the books. This is the first official form of an indication from the court of overturning Roe. And this is how most Republicans have been sounding lately.
Whoever did this leak should be prosecuted and should go to jail for a very long time.
The Supreme Court found itself the victim of a unauthorized leak.
You need, it seems to me, excuse the lecture, to concentrate on what the news is today. Not a leaked draft, but the fact that the draft was leaked.
This did more damage than a bunch of elderly Trump voters taking selfies in the rotunda.
The leak was a terrible thing. You're just not used to that for the Supreme Court. It was very shocking.
Make no mistake, Sean, this is an insurrection against the Supreme Court.
They're trying to stop justice from being administered at the highest levels in our country by intimidating the sitting justices.
That is a lot of concern about the leak. Fact check for Ted Cruz, there is no law that makes this a crime. That means you can't put someone in jail for it, and you can't pass a new law to criminalize past conduct. And Ted Cruz, the lawyer, former Solicitor General of Texas, he knows that. So he knows he's lying about the law. FBI can't even really get very involved if there's no underlying crime to investigate. Now, there is a big problem with the security, secrecy, and propriety breach here at the Supreme Court, and we can get to that. But it would seem odd to focus exclusively on that, or as Mitch McConnell said there, to demand everyone else and the free and independent press focus on that and not the substance of what's coming down the pike. Now, when the right has discussed that, you can see some clues and tells about where they want to go.
The Constitution is silent on this issue. That means that it is up to the people to decide in the 50 states.
Usurpation of that power by the Supreme Court.
Here's the big lie. The overturning of Roe v. Wade does not end abortion.
Horrifyingly, he argued for post-birth abortion, which is just flat-out murder.
They'll fight for harder than anything else, and that's sacrificing babies on the altar of Baal.
This is about abortion on demand. This is utter fanaticism, and it's burned down the court.
It's not a salami sandwich. It's a viable baby in the womb.
As you can see, when they do talk about the ruling, they're all over the place, either talking about murder and the kind of, quote, abortionist language that Justice Alito uses, or pivoting to other things. It is a weird time to pivot to other things when you have spent half a century, no exaggeration, no cap, trying to get this thing. But the people you saw there who deal with the public, like politicians or people who even think about public approval, they know they are on the wrong side of a majority of America, which includes many conservatives. Now, there's a piece in Slate that notes the worst thing that could happen to the GOP would be for the public's trust in the courts to collapse now as it achieves, quote, crowning but politically unpopular legal victories like this one. There is a larger problem here, and maybe that's why there's such a deflection of what's happening. Justice Alito states, far from bringing about a national settlement of the abortion issue, the original Roe opinion, and Casey, he writes, referring to a later ruling upholding it, quote, inflamed debate and deepened division. Now, that is what lawyers call an observation, not a legal ruling. That is just him talking about what he thinks is going on out there. And it is certainly true that after Roe, abortion became a bigger issue in politics and certainly, as we all have seen, in the judicial nomination process. But what Alito implies in this draft ruling is that he will now undo and therefore redo what happened in 73. And that by doing this, he will reduce those stated divisions. Well, A, that's not part of his job. Indeed, that's the very thing he said was wrong with the original Roe precedent. And B, if he is going to try to play pollster, he's not very good at it. Because when you kick something like this back out to the public, undoing 49 years of precedent and every single justice who said under oath that this was a precedent or a super precedent to be respected, that now they say was egregiously wrong from the start, well, boy, you might just inflame some divisions. And as for those other topics I mentioned, well, there are people who, looking at what Alito wrote, are saying that provides a foundation to ban contraception or the morning after pill. There are some conservative commentators saying if there's no right to intimate privacy and context, then maybe they can undo marriage equality. Yeah, that's why people who have to face voters are talking about the leak. And what is going on with the leak? Well, the Supreme Court marshal has been tasked by the Chief Justice to do something they've never done before, which is conduct an internal leak investigation. Whether they interview justices under oath or how that's going to go is an open question.
This opinion is dark, it is incredibly dangerous, and it is not just about a woman's right to choose. It is about much more than that. And I hope people now are fully aware of what we're up against. Once you allow this kind of extreme power to take hold, you have no idea who they will come for next.
Hillary Clinton's new warning about that draft opinion, and we're joined as promised by Yale law professor Amy Kopczynski, who has clerked for both Justices O'Connor and Breyer. Justice O'Connor wrote the bulk of the 92 opinion that reaffirmed Roe. Welcome to the program.
Thanks so much.
When you see the obsession on the right with the leak itself, what, if anything, does that tell you? And now that we've had a few days, what do you see in this unprecedented leak and how it may impact the court?
I mean, I think you're exactly right that the Republican obsession with the leak is about changing the subject away from this really scary opinion that just kind of drops a bomb on precedent that's been around for decades and that protects lots and lots of people. So I think they don't want to talk about the leak. And, you know, it's to detract attention away from the kind of extreme views of this, 5 or 6 person majority on this court that is really unpopular. I think, part of what's going on here really is that there's been, as you said, like a 40 or 50 year project to take over the courts and to overturn Roe and a lot of other things. It's not very popular. And so they don't want to talk about that at a moment like this, but that's what there is in front of us.
The draft, which has been confirmed by the Supreme Court, indicates that Justice Alito believed in February he had the 5 votes to overturn Roe. Based on what we know in public, do you think that is still the case tonight?
I mean, I think it's very hard to say what's going on inside the court right now. I mean, this is an unusual situation. I think it's very possible that there's jockeying going on, and that, part of what this leak is about is an attempt to lock those 5 votes down. There's enormous stakes in exactly what that opinion says. And, if you look not just at the leak, but what came out in the Wall Street Journal about a week ago, it seems pretty clear from the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal that somebody on the conservative side of the court was leaking things to the Wall Street Journal to try to get the 5 votes that they need for that opinion. So I think, there's probably something still going on in there.
Yeah, just to pause. There's plenty of leaking in Washington, but you're saying the way you read the Journal's knowledge or purported knowledge of the process, it would suggest that someone on the inside was concerned that that one of those 5 might go to Roberts' opinion that would be narrower?
Yeah, something like that. Exactly. Or want to change the language. Remember, the language of this opinion is about as extreme as it gets, right? So there's no reason, the way that this opinion is written, that any of the other decisions that the Supreme Court has come down with that protect families and parents' rights to educate their children, or LGBT rights, or prevent forced sterilization or protect contraception, any of that. So that language, of course, can change before the opinion's out, and I think that's a lot of what's at stake here.